I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist, and in 1996, I wrote a series of stories entitled Dark Alliance, which was about CIA involvement in drug trafficking.
I knew a man who once said death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back.
We've both been skull and bone, the secret society. It's so secret we can't talk about it. What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go on.
Sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the rest.
Number 322.
I sad duty to report this afternoon that my friend and colleague, Tim Russert, collapsed and died early this afternoon.
I may die in this cell tonight or in the arena tomorrow. I am a slave. What possible difference can I make?
And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
What's up, guys? Good morning. Happy J6. I guess to everyone except the political prisoners who still have yet to be pardoned. But yeah, hopefully that will come inevitably sometime shortly in the near future. We will see some sort of progress as far as that's concerned. But yeah, that whole federal operation at the Capitol seemed to have long-standing consequences for anyone who was naive enough to kind of show themselves there. And I don't mean to kind of target anyone for attending, but I just think that you have to be a bit naive if you believe kind of appearing at some sort of federal protest or just any sort of protest, that there aren't just feds oversaturating the various groups involved, especially if anything proceeds to pop off. And remembering J6, anyone that I was like sort of like swimming in the circles with, as far as like at the time, it was just kind of interesting because the vast majority of people that at least are kind of more like-minded as far as we are concerned, were entirely aware of something that was about to take place on January 6th that was going to be some typical false flag event that of course paints this false paradigm again, where we find ourselves, this sort of misconception of reality, right? And this misconception of reality sort of is predicated on an illusion in itself, right? And so, it's kind of a devastating prospect to realize that these individuals who are entirely innocent and were basically being ushered through the Capitol between velvet ropes by security were then, clearly targeted by, right, the political class. And then just talk about domestic oppression, right? Talk about just, my God, a trap once again of convenience for this partisan delusion, right? And so, yeah, I think anytime we have the opportunity to kind of spotlight the unfortunate reality of what took place on January 6th and what is still happening to many of those innocent protesters, especially the ones who had suffered in solitary confinement and all of these terrible, just destructive policies that are attempted to break them in their spirit. It's just no one deserves that, especially. Well, I mean, no innocent civilian deserves that, and especially when they've been seduced into supporting politicians that will never defend them, right, and come to their defense. And so that's what I hope will that at the very least, even if it's just some sort of political victory, and that is the only priority. Hopefully, something does take place, and we will see that come to fruition in the near future. But anyway, I guess I should say, welcome to the Morning Dump, and I'm Austin Picard from the Underclass Podcast. I think it's kind of hilarious that, man, there's not going to be a difficulty as far as coming up with things that we can discuss that are breaking news, relevant events happening. And, I should start out by suggesting the fact that this whole Sean, Sean Ryan podcast with Sam Shoemate is so clearly a limited hangout to me. And, oh, and by the way, I guess I should also mention the fact that there seems to be some sort of, you know, ratcheting up for this kind of like COVID-like hysteria surrounding the bird flu, which obviously isn't, quite as. I would say it's a little bit more difficult to achieve, that a similar type of emotional hysteria in regard to the comparison with COVID. But it's very obvious when they're utilizing similar assets, right, in the media to kind of like prop up this false narrative, including that of Leanna Wynn, Dr. Leanna Wynn, who we've talked about before, and she she happened to also provide some strange role to the media during the Boston Marathon bombings as well, which of course that makes sense. And yeah, she's the one who during COVID, of course, was making the rounds, targeting the unvaccinated, talking about we have to dangle the carrot in front of the unvaccinated, right, and create these incentives, right, which was all authoritarian in nature. But yeah, now she's very concerned about the bird flu and potentially this H5N1 vaccine that's clearly already been developed, right? So if you understand how these tabletop exercises work, Project Crimson Contagion, beyond Event 201, which if you've done any minimal research in regard to COVID, then you're well aware by now that this has all sort of been manufactured. They figured out how to allow the media to react in the moment, and it was all sort of this very strategic psychological operation. What's up, buddy? Good morning. And again, like I mentioned before, entirely predicated on an illusion, right? Um, we see now. I mean, I just see so many people that fell into that COVID hysteria, and they're suffering long-term consequences because of that, right? Because of that naivete and that unfortunate willingness to, you know, it's the fear mechanism, right? It's like if you can kind of create this idea that this it's always been, it's an age-old tactic, right? It really does seem to, derail any sort of critical thinking ability. But of course, you would have had to have kind of developed that over time to begin with. So if you if you didn't quite have that in your toolbox at the time, then yeah, that's exactly how it happens, right? Is that you are unarmed with the defense mechanism that is necessary and needs to be in place in order for you to not fall into that trap. And so anyway, I think one of the main things I wanted to cover, first of all, beyond like we're clearly going to have to get into the. I mean, my God, there's news coming out that apparently the assistant district attorney with the New Orleans Parish DA's office was found dead with an apparent gunshot wound, allegedly a suicide, right? And this coming fresh off the heels, of course, of the New Orleans massacre, the New Orleans, tragic terrorist attack, I guess is what we have to call it. But yeah, domestic terrorist operation. I don't know. There's definitely a better way to describe it, but um, it does seem strange. But I looked into exactly what her role was, or his role. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Something. I have it pulled up here, but I found it important because mainly I think one, I wanted to make sure, like, where was this individual actively investigating the New Orleans terrorist attack, whenever, right, they were found dead at the DA's office, and I couldn't get a straight answer on that. So I'm not entirely sure, other than it is strange that apparently he has Ian Kirsting. So this is according to the Independent Sentinel, and so as reported on yesterday, that Orleans Parish Assistant District Attorney Ian Kirsting was discovered dead Saturday around 9 p.m. He committed suicide inside the offices of District Attorney Jason Williams' staff, according to authorities. His cause of death was an apparent gunshot wound to the head. Police said emergency medical services arrived at the DA's office building, but Kirsting was already deceased. So Ian Kirsting, a 34-year-old parish prosecutor near New Orleans, died from apparent self-inflicted gunshot wounds. And let's see. Kirsting admitted to the Louisiana bar in 2023, specialized in sexual harassment cases, and worked on the DA office's sexual assault kit initiative, collaborating on sex crime investigations. So that raised a little suspicion in my mind, only due to the fact that I've covered so many of these sexual abuse cases, and any sort of official like this who's in a primary position during the investigative process in regard to, assessing the credibility of rape allegations or sexual abuse allegations, you are most definitely a target, and especially if you're standing in the way of some sort of overarching cover up, some sort of, federal involvement, right? And I think that's never been more obvious than during the Delphi murders case that I just recently covered with Richard Allen, right? And we will discuss that in a little while, because I think that an update for the Delphi murders is very important and relevant as well, because the 20th of December is when Richard Allen was sentenced. And so yeah, we'll definitely have to discuss that. But I wanted to show you guys this strange video because, well, first of all, you guys need to look at this picture, which I'm sure most have probably seen by now. But yeah, if you have not, it's important. It's important just to know, right, that that old Shamsuddin Jabbar decided that he was going to pose like this, and obviously, if you know anything about symbolism and the occult, then this raises a red flag for you. So for myself, this New Orleans terrorist Shamsuddin Jabbar had to have been involved with the Boule Society to a certain extent. Obviously, that symbol there is involved with, yes, Freemasonry, right? And has ties with the Rosicrucian order, and in no way do you accidentally pose with this symbolism overtly, in publicly in our faces. And then also the notion is he's clearly a compromised asset, whether he was patsied as a potential, mind control Manchurian. Look, I think that we all need to just clearly we should always keep that in mind in regarding these events such as these, because I'll never forget, especially when I was looking into this individual, Shamsuddin Jabbar. I read this article about I still for the life of me. It's very, very yeah, no Rumble right now, guys. Just so you know. Um Jose and I, we're gonna figure this out as far as like I'm gonna get like I had mentioned on Saturday. My Rumble is gonna be up and running within the week, and so I'll be able to stream to the Rumble as well. But we'll have to build that up, unfortunately. But at least for now, uh, I'm streaming on Jose's YouTube and his Twitter, but mainly it was just to kind of introduce you guys to this sort of concept of doing the morning dump on the days on in the mornings where Jose won't be able to do it. Then of course I can kind of fill in and we can just discuss some of the more relevant topical events that are occurring at the time. And so, yeah, no Rumble stream as of now, but it will be implemented in the near future. But it'll be through my Rumble. So definitely from here, I'll definitely let you guys know as soon as it's up and running. It as far as like it is technically I created it, but I haven't like customized it at all. So um, I'll let you guys know as soon as it's ready, and I'll start posting to that as well. So. Um, it's only a good idea anyway because I'm very concerned about potential censorship on YouTube at some point, which hopefully we can skate by as long as possible. But yeah, it seems to be sort of inevitable at this point. But anyway, so before I forget, I do want to talk about this Sh- Sean Ryan, right, and Sam Shoemate, because I really do think that first of all, this alone, right, it's hilarious to me. So this Jeremy Lafredo on Twitter says before former intelligence officer Sam Shoemate and former CIA contractor Sean Ryan discuss the story that will doubtlessly change the course of humanity, they perform a paid advertisement gift exchange where Sean gives Sam the Eric Prince unplugged phone. So, um, if you don't know who Eric Prince is, go read Blackwater, The Rise of the World's Largest Mercenary Complex, or something like that. But Blackwater by um, Jeremy Scahill, right? And it's a phenomenal book, but it really did expose how that essentially during the terror wars, the U.S. State Department and the Pentagon used private mercenary contractors, to essentially commit war crimes, and they would really not be held liable, right, under the same rules of engagement as our military men, right? And so it's very tragic, but that is why you have so many terrifying stories revolving around these military contractors like Blackwater, and when they would just go straight Wild West out there in Iraq and start taking areas that of land that wasn't even tactically operationally involved as far as a part of the plan. And what's up, buddy? How's it going, brother? Good morning. And yeah, just it's really sad because if you if you read that book, there's a reason that one of the Blackwater contractors, there were a couple of them that actually pushed too far. They had got into one of the red conflict zones, right, which was a top threat, right? It means you could legitimately die if you find yourself within this area, and yeah, they were making deliveries for some private corporation, some private company who was it had to do with um, with like silverware of all things, which is kind of ridiculous. At least that was the official story, right? And this I forget the name of this contractor, but he was a pretty famous guy, and his story went viral afterward because he inevitably him and a couple of other contractors, American contractors, were ripped out of the Blackwater vehicle, um, and basically hung right from a bridge, I believe is what it was, if I can remember right. I can't remember now, but I do remember it was just like this tragic event that occurred, but it was due to the fact that these military contractors were not where they were meant to be to begin with, right? And if you had known any of the prior context involved, as far as like legitimately, there are accounts of members of the military saying that Blackwater would just show up. They would drop a team down on the ground, and that whoever the Blackwater officer was who was running the group would then effectively take over the rules of engagement. So therefore, our military men were taking orders from Blackwater contractors, and so it was really you know people don't understand the organized chaos that truly does occur as far as in these international conflicts and these active war zones. And so I'm not at all surprised that Eric Prince is involved and remember Betsy DeVos, I believe, is his sister. And she, I think, she was put in charge of, I think, public education during the Trump administration, if I remember, that was her role. But either way, it was a prominent position. And I just remember that moment when she was named. I just thought, okay, well, we have another prince in the White House, right? Like with too much proximity, too close to the White House as far as any sort of consequential policy positions are concerned. But anyway, so I think that besides like this clear grift that was taking place before this bombshell, revealing of this, what I believe to be manufactured narrative by the intelligence community. You have this ridiculous, right, gift exchange, and so yeah, nothing to see here. It's not as if we need to question these spooks and their unreliable backgrounds, but it's okay. I guess we should take what they're saying at face value and consider that they're very scared about the information they're about to expose to the public. They're very worried about their safety. I just think that's laughable. But anyway, since I did mention this, it's kind of hilarious. We should probably, if you didn't know what Leanna Wynn is up to right now, just so you guys are aware from here on out, like clearly, I don't know what the goal is during the Trump administration, but the fact of the matter is COVID was clearly utilized during the first Trump administration to, in more ways than one, create this just excruciating divide, right? This insane, like, you couldn't be more polar opposite on the ends of the political spectrum where you fell during the COVID hysteria, right? And the division those policies were able to achieve was truly extraordinary, right? And something that never actually, thought I would personally witness, but I will be very shocked if this, because of how useful and successful it truly was, I would imagine in their terms, it would shock me if they didn't attempt to kind of recycle that sort of propagandistic technique, right? And so before we get off base, we might as well listen to warp speed ahead, everybody. Exactly. And that's something that I'll never forgive the Trump administration for, is Operation Warp Speed. And yeah, so anyone who just decides that due to your political preference and it's your job to defend these strange political puppets, you're still defending authoritarian policies, right? And that's really, in essence, that is all that truly matters. And so it's just an unfortunate situation when you should be able to engage with this false paradigm in a more objective way and stop falling into the partisan trap. I think that's the unfortunate aspect here. But so yeah, let's check this out real quick, because yeah, here we go again potentially.
Year-old patient in Louisiana is suffering. Bird flu has mutated as a 65-year-old patient in Louisiana is suffering the nation's first severe infection.
This month, California Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency over the virus.
When is bird flu in humans super dangerous?
Well, the World Health Organization estimates that in prior outbreaks of the bird flu, that the mortality rate is 52%. 52%.
California worries me because of all the spread in cattle in California. That's absolutely unprecedented, and that's why we have a level of alert here, and we need to be vigilant.
I feel like we should have learned our lesson from COVID, that just because we aren't testing, it doesn't mean that the virus isn't there. It just means that we aren't looking for it. We should be having rapid tests, home tests available to all.
Concerning news from the CDC, the agency says H5N1 bird flu samples collected from a severely ill patient in Louisiana showed signs of mutation.
All right. Yeah, nothing big. Just the unfortunate prospect of, once again, right, being just having our public health system entirely subverted. And I saw this hilarious meme of like, they said the nurses getting ready for the bird flu scamdemic, right? And it has like all these women like learning choreographed dance routines, and I just thought that was hilarious, due to the, of course, ridiculous nature of that taking place during COVID, right? But anyway, so this is something else that I found important, as I had mentioned Sam Shoemate and on the Sean Ryan podcast, and how now he's kind of changing his tune, right? Because at first, right, he had said that he believed Livelsberger was happy and alive, right? And now he's claiming, and this is Clint Russell who pointed this out. I think it's a perfect, perfect point to make. But now he's claiming that he was on antipsychotics and is not alive, and this is allegedly, according to, I believe, information he claimed to have received from friends and family of Livelsberger, the Cybertruck, perpetrator. And so let's check this out real quick, because this is, if you trust Sam Shoemate, yeah, I'm going to have to say, it's you're running a risk, right? Because any one of these, like I mentioned on Saturday, these spooks are just mind manipulators, right? And so they are so well versed in these strategic operations and how you present false narratives to the public. And so you can kind of, no matter what, if you're sort of armed with the tools of being able to, kind of assess the credibility yourself, you almost off the cuff, on its face, you smell the just the deceptive nature of it, of the narrative itself. And so that's what I find within Sam Shoemate. And it's kind of hilarious because this weird nerdy guy does this whole breakdown on how he's exposed as this fraud. And so we'll get into that as well, because these claims are clearly, there are a few that seem to be shocking allegations. For example, there's this thread on MK Ultra potentially being involved with Sean Ryan and Project Monarch. And that is something that tends to crop up and resurface within the context of police patsies and false flag operations and psychological, clearly psyop tactics. And so let's see what Shoemate has changed his story, and as far as like his explanation as to why he changed his story here, because I think this alone, it's clear he's kind of muddying the waters here. The perhaps his handlers weren't quite, satisfied with the consequential ramifications of the initial interview with Sean Ryan. I'm not quite certain of the reason, but let's check this out because and by the way, Sean Ryan is so obviously some sort of asset that's providing false narratives to the public, and tends to be. You see him cropping up in this alternative media landscape that is corralling all of these individuals who are fleeing from the mainstream media and the death of the free press, and he is one of these individuals who is clearly, a misinformation operative, right? And so I don't trust him for a moment. And when you see the things that he has said on Joe Rogan, yeah, it's very difficult to not remain skeptical of this individual as a potential active, asset in the new alternative media landscape. So, yeah, exactly. What's it called when lying isn't lying? Acting. Yeah, that is exactly what these spooks, these assets, they are very well trained in acting courses, and they honestly are. And that's what I found so crazy about the timing and the as far as just how they train these individuals to speak to the public. It's very strategic, right? And it does very much kind of seduce you into, potentially just, I think that mainly it's the ability to kind of, present the information as a credible source, but while providing these sort of misleading, deceptive threads, right? That clearly most of the time, now, if you know what a limited hangout is, this is something that's very important, right? Because all these simultaneous ops are running, and oh, yes, this is perfect, right? They're running ops simultaneously every single day. Absolutely, my friend. And so I just think that what we need to understand is that Victor Marchetti, right? I talked about him before. He's a pretty phenomenal source, right? And Victor Marchetti, he's a former special assistant to the deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency. And he talks about the concept of a limited hangout, right? And he calls it spy jargon for a favorite and frequently used gimmick of the clandestine professionals when their veil of secrecy is shredded and they can no longer rely on a phony cover story to misinform the public. They resort to admitting, sometimes even volunteering, some of the truth, while still managing to withhold the key and damaging facts in the case. The public, however, is usually so intrigued by the new information that it never thinks to pursue the matter further. While used by the CIA and other intelligence organizations, the tactic has become popularized in the corporate and political spheres. And that, to me, is par for the course. I believe that these operators, they deal, right? They deal in limited hangouts on a very frequent basis. And so let's see what our old boy Sam Shoemate has to say.
So after I did the interview, a lot of people, nobody knew that I had the manifesto. I had to be very quiet for a day. So people were messaging me and they're like, have you heard of this guy? Have you seen this? Blah, blah, blah. And they didn't know I wasn't posting on it. People expect me to post on these relevant incidents like this, because just like I had posted on the New Orleans guy. So I was like being very quiet because Sean was like, dude, you haven't told anybody, any other media you have this, right? I was like, no, nobody. I wasn't going to put it out on my own social media because people would be like,
never.
Dude, you made this up. I knew I couldn't handle this information on my own. So anyways, after I did the show, and it blew up and people were like, holy crap. They knew who I was. And people on my Instagram page started telling me things. So I had a lot of people reaching out, telling me what they had talked to, but with their Green Beret buddies. One person reached out and told me they had a very close connection to members of the family, which I won't go into. But what I've learned since then, and I'm going to say allegedly, because I don't have proof of this, but I've had 3 people tell me this. Allegedly, Matt Livelsberger changed his meds several days prior to this incident. I don't know what several days means, but what I was told by several people who I value their input and who were close to the situation told me that he was on antipsychotic medication. He had changed his medications And they said that basically something crazy happened and he became suicidal. So people ask me, is he sane? Was he whatever? Well, I've gotten two stories on this, and I want people to hear me very carefully on this because I am saying two different things at the same time. What I have heard from family members, and this is what I put out. I think I put this out on the Sean Ryan podcast because I heard this from, I saw this on social media. I have not personally talked to any family members. Let me make that clear. I saw on social media that members of his family had said that this was not normal for him. He was very normal. He was very sane mind. His teammates were shocked. Everybody was shocked because he was not a crazy dude, whatever else. And that's what I knew. And then after the podcast, I found out that it was literally, he changed his medication within days of this event and something shifted. So if his family had not seen that within the days of this, he could have been acting very bizarre, very strange. And the manifesto that he wrote, along with these letters and everything else, the guy was clearly, and I will stick to this. His desire was to send a message. It wasn't to do a mass casualty event. It wasn't to screw anybody over. It was to make this message as prominent as possible. And I still believe that. He was not trying to blow up that tower, in my opinion. He was not trying to blow up the tower. He was not trying to kill a bunch of people. The dude, and I say this respectfully to his teammates. I say this respectfully to his family. The dude had a screw loose, okay? I'm not going to get into the labeling of him. I don't know what his situation was, but I believe that he had a psychotic break. Whatever he was living with from whatever he thinks happened in 2019, whether it happened or not, these alleged war crimes, maybe what he knows about drone warfare and technology, maybe that was real. Maybe it was coupled with fantasy. Maybe his brain and it mushed the two together and it was all very bizarre. And that's my initial take when I read the manifesto without knowing the context of who this person was and what he was about to do. So I think, I don't think, I will say this, I will back up. I put out a theory, and I made clear that it was a theory of him potentially being alive, and I walked through the steps of that. I don't think he's alive now based on the information that has come out from the Las Vegas Police Department. I think he is in fact dead.
All right. Well, that is definitely a change in the story and the narrative. But what struck me most, as far as just raised my eyebrows more than anything, was this strange connection to Dr. Stephen Greer, which, if you know about the Disclosure Project and the deep ties to the Rockefeller family, right, and these special interest organizations and groups, and Rothschilds as well, right, Baron Edmund de Rothschild, and these various oligarchic bureaucrats, right? They clearly are financing these projects that are within the framework of psychological operations, and that was what I always trace back, the Disclosure Project all the way back to Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast, right, on PBS, and how it was created to study, right, the psychological consequences of this false disclosure to the public. And it had people panicking. There was a hysteria that was manufactured overnight, right, with this ridiculous broadcast that was clearly, a live reading of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, right? And you had farmers believing that we were being invaded by Martians and that there was an actual intergalactic war right? And it's like, it's just like what they were able to achieve then. It was all funded by the Princeton Radio Project, which was, financed by the Rockefeller family, and clearly had deep ties with intelligence. And that's what people need to understand, is that the United Nations and these various organizations that have been cultivated and created to steer policies, because that's what it is. They're policy steering organizations, but also they've been created to create to manufacture this fundamental framework, right, of how you globally subvert society into this modern feudalist state, right? Which that's what it's becoming, this massive globalist feudalist system where, we're clearly just sort of serfs, right? We find ourselves in some status of serfdom at this point. And, and our bureaucratic overlords are just further distancing themselves from any sort of middle to lower class that ever used to exist in the first place. And that's all by design, right? And so we find ourselves looking eye to eye with another one of these operatives who's been propped up by the deep state and the Rockefeller family and the intelligence connections to provide false narratives to the public in the vein of extraterrestrials, right? And this sort of, what I believe is, I've said it before, the replacement, the great replacement. It's almost like the God complex again, right? Where it's the New Age religion, that all is kind of allowing individuals on the political spectrum to replace any sort of conservative moral values. Not saying that all conservative moral values have been identified and understood and are worthwhile in every aspect, but I do believe that there's so much more value to the as far as just the ethical standards of certain conservative values, and that's what has been deliberately targeted and eroded, and it's all again in this ultimate this ultimate agenda of degradation, right? And societal degradation. And so we are embracing these upside down moral concepts, right? Which seem to be kind of justified, right, with this new age perspective and of progress, but in reality it's just a false framework in order to deceive you into the fold. And I think that's where operatives like Stephen Greer, right? I don't know, I'm almost more along under the impression that like a guy like Bob Lazar might have just been sort of like damn it, I forgot the guy's name that wrote I forgot the author's name, but anyway, but Bob Lazar reminds me a lot of someone who, and this has been said before, but he reminds me a lot of an individual who was clearly kind of like read in on false information, right? Given Bill Cooper said the same thing, right? Where he was under the impression that he was given false intelligence, right? And it was only because they wanted him to provide this false intelligence to the public in a fashion of a limited hangout, but unbeknownst to him. So he would be under the impression that this was legitimate intelligence, incredible, right? And so I don't know if how much you can, as far as trust Bob Lazar, but I think that story it's just it feels so much like it's a fantasy, right? Just a work of fiction. But I could see him, working on some sort of black site. He said he was on S4, where oh, what's it called? Shit. Oh shit, I can't remember the damn name of the facility over there for some reason. But yeah, anyway, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I can't. Area 51. Thank God. I couldn't remember. I could remember S4, but I couldn't remember Area 51. So S4, it was a part of Area 51 on that same forget the name of the plot of land, right, that they developed as a black site to at least kind of like work on these allegedly these sophisticated aircrafts in a clandestine manner. And so they had even apparently they had this sort of fake rock formation, or maybe it was a real rock formation, but then they had like apparently they had gutted it, and certain areas of the rock formation would actually open up and it into like Groom Lake, Los Alamos. Yeah, exactly. That's Yeah, Bob Lazar spook for sure. That's I agree. But I do think that you can never you can never at least entirely, well, not never, I should say, but you should you should always, I think, at least consider the fact that some of these operatives did have like potentially decent intentions, right? Um, and so maybe some of them did become a liability, such as Bob Lazar, because the whole narrative behind that was that as he's working at this S4 facility at Area 51 and working on these extraordinary aircraft, he apparently he wasn't able to tell his wife what he was doing because it was classified, of course, and top secret. And so then his wife starts thinking that he's cheating on her. And so instead of them having some sort of constructive conversation, well, it turns out that she started cheating on him. So apparently, that in the context of being an intelligence operative or an asset of any kind, right? Um, you are now you are now vulnerable, right? And you are now a liability because now people can clearly they could leverage this against you for their own benefit. So that was kind of the narrative behind what had inevitably occurred with Bob Lazar and why he had this falling out, and was then sort of ran out of this covert project, which he was apparently just very overqualified because he had created this highly technical, sophisticated a vehicle, I think, that even operated off just water. I think it was fueled by water, or maybe that was a different person who was actually. I know someone else did that as well, and they tried to patent it, and then they were assassinated. So, but I'm pretty sure Bob Lazar did create some strange vehicle that caught the eye of these individuals who, working in intelligence circles, and thought he would be some sort of valuable intellect to bring onto the project. And then throughout the course of the project, he was, like I had mentioned, became a liability. And so then they started kind of targeting him, and he became very concerned. But this was, I believe, the targeting of him personally started to occur after he was kicked out of S4 in the project, and then he started bringing his buddies up because they would have these flight tests, I guess, over Groom Lake, and he would bring his buddies out to watch it because he wanted them to believe what he was telling them was true. And so they would show up to this, and I think they showed up once. They didn't get caught somehow, and then they showed up at least another couple times, or maybe just one other time. I can't remember now, but and that's when they were apprehended by these men in black, right? And so I don't know. I just, when you look at these individuals, I kind of think it's interesting what Bill Cooper did say about being provided with false information under the sort of the pretense of it being this legitimate intelligence that has been unexposed. So anyway, Stephen Greer, it just so happens, is connected to this Livelsberger through some sort of he's connected to Green Berets because apparently, if you look at this strange thread, this strange it's an MK Ultra thread. Let me find it. Here it is. Concerning Sean Ryan and MK Ultra, right? And so you click into this, and it's allegedly a public service announcement. I looked into this guy, right? And this is what he says he is, who's making these claims. Okay, he's a former NOC monarch turned whistleblower, survived Boston Breaks event in 2008, was falsely imprisoned, Blue Child Behavioral Modification Program data in 2014. So I need to look further into this individual and assess the credibility myself personally. but I did find this to be an extraordinary thread because, again, it feels very schizophrenic in nature, but that's typical in regard to these sort of threads of evidence. So I'm not at all shocked that it kind of comes across that way, but this is what happens. It says that Sean is actively involved, perhaps unwitting, which I find interesting, in CIA and co-military media mind control programs stemming from MKUltra. Sean's former friend and SRS researcher became self-aware as a subject in Monarch after he contacted them in early 2023. This individual contacted them. And let me look one more time. What was his? I don't think he even has named himself. I looked him up yesterday. I can't remember now what his name allegedly is, but anyway, he does have a background in the intelligence community, so that is legitimate, and so that alone, gave me pause, right? So anyway, he says that he contacts this former friend of Sean's, and apparently he had become self-aware as a subject in Project Monarch, which means you're a Manchurian candidate, and this falls underneath kind of that same exact. It falls within that same framework, right? Of as far as just clearly you're dealing with a potential mind-controlled asset, right? And so for me, it was interesting because Tamerlan Tsarnaev, with the Boston Marathon bombings, I always found it strange that he had told his mom, and this was used. It was unfortunate because it was used as a kind of a pretext for claiming he was having a schizophrenic break, right? And that was used to, of course, claim that it was plausible for him to have committed this terrorist act, right? And what he had told even though clearly we know he has deep intelligence connections as far as ties to Graham Fuller, the grandfather or godfather of Al Qaeda, and all of this crazy stuff. Uncle Ruslan Tsarnaev, his uncle, was clearly working, living with Graham Fuller for a time in the Middle East. So it'll blow you away, the extraordinary connections there. But once I was researching Tamerlan, I found out that he basically claimed to his mother that he was having this. He was having all this. He couldn't account for this loss in time, right? He felt like his brain was fracturing in two, and he would wake up and he wouldn't understand how he even got to where he was. And this all started to occur leading up to the Boston Marathon bombings, and so that perfectly resembles dissociative identity disorder, right? DID, and these strange, techniques that have been developed and sophisticated for generations as far as their ability to break down your psychological framework, into these alternative personalities, these alternate personalities, what they call alters. And usually if you're targeted from a child from a very young age, then they're far more successful. I've been, at least I've read, but who knows at this point, especially considering electromagnetic frequencies and these various drugs that they've been able to utilize to their advantage as well. It's kind of like, I don't think we even have a conceptual understanding of what they're capable of at this moment, right? And so that's what worried me with Tamerlane, was that it fit perfectly with him just being targeted with subliminals during his sleep. Who knows what they did to Tamerlan Tsarnaev, but I don't believe that he was acting, out of his own, as far as like, it was clearly not Tamerlan's decision in my mind, right? Especially seeing the footage of him and Zahar, his brother, when they were at the marathon that day, and then always consider what Zahar said that night, right? Which ain't no love in the heart of the city. Stay safe, people. And I'll never forget that, especially considering how every person surrounding Tamerlane and Zahar, um, they didn't they they kn they claimed they knew it wasn't within the character of the boys. I believe it was their aunt who made me cry, basically, because she was so certain of their innocence and said, "Show me the footage," right? Which they, of course, didn't have. But show me the footage. Show me the footage of Tamerlane doing this, of the boys doing this, and then I will believe you, right? But it was just like a very tragic experience. But once you're aware of those things and you realize that this is clearly been a recycled tactic and a reoccurring factor involved with a lot of these manufactured crises, then it has to play a role in how you kind of assess the reality of the narratives that are forming, around these events. So um, let's see what this says a little bit more, and then we'll kind of pivot into a different direction. But so, what are you guys up to anyway? You guys send me some article links or something if there's anything you guys want me to cover in the moment. If it has, I mean, even if it doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about, but if it does have something to do with what we're talking about, it's even better. Maybe it would, you know, add some additional layer worthwhile of, and plus it gives me a reason to engage further with you guys. So if you do find anything that you want to share with me and you want me to bring to the table, hit me up, send it in the chat, DM me, even direct message me whenever. I appreciate you guys for showing up for sure. But all right, so apparently they were cut off from Sean immediately after becoming self-aware of being a Project Monarch asset. And then there were attempts to route them to the Monroe Institute, which is 100% known to be involved and is where many are sent for reprogramming or closeout. Now that's interesting as well, especially when I think of Dr. Robert Duncan, which we talked about Saturday, and how he claims that these thousands of Manchurians, these thousands of potential candidates, not all of them, it's a very minor fraction of them, a minor percentage that actually turn and evolve into successful Manchurians, meaning the way he put it was that there's almost like this time frame that you're working with where inevitably most candidate Manchurians become self-aware. So that again reminded me of, I forget I think it was in Colorado, but it was a theme park that an individual had broken into this theme park overnight with weapons, had gone into the restroom in the theme park and had written on the mirror, I believe, or maybe it was on the wall, I can't recall now, but had written basically that, they could not go through with this, and that they had to wake up basically, and that the only way that they could wake up was to commit suicide, right? And so basically the only way to resist their prior programming was to terminate themselves as the asset. And that's terrifying, because that, again, I think of, okay, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, my mind is fracturing. I can't account for this loss in time. It's exactly what all these prior patsies and Manchurians have claimed themselves as well. So it's just perfectly in line with the consequences of controlling the human mind, right? I mean, it has to be a factor of fracturing your mind into compartments, basically compartmentalize your actions, and that makes all the sense in the world for how you would psychologically manipulate a person. And so we have to ask ourselves what is real and what is not at this point. And it's very difficult, I think, to even begin to answer that question. So yeah, by the way, I think that's what's happening. I think that there is another chat I should be monitoring that I'm unaware of. I'll talk to Jose later and see if that's the problem, because I see your guys' chats in the StreamYard, but maybe I should be also monitoring your chats on the YouTube as well. But either way, yeah, I hope you guys appreciate this kind of format. I think that it will be something that is valuable and worthwhile in the long run. So, but yeah, as soon as I figure out if I should have the YouTube up as well, and on, because I have them on both, so I just need to make sure that I'm getting all the chats, so I can make sure I'm talking to you guys and responding and reacting in the moment as much as I possibly can. So anyway, to finish this off, let's yeah, the Monroe Institute, that raised red flag for me as well. But so this isn't about slamming Sean or the show, but issues have already been whitewashed. This is dangerous for the American people. SRS served just enough to hook a very important demographic and is an extremely effective limited hangout and narrative steering operation. That just sounds exactly like my knee-jerk reaction to the Sean Ryan podcast. And so apparently there's much more, according to this guy. Unredacted conversation and additional brief available for actual journalists or large social media accounts that want to do the right thing. And so this is when it gets into, it's very strange, because apparently there's a Stephen Greer connection, which is absurd. But this right here looks weird as hell to me. So I don't know. Maybe this is legitimate, or maybe this is an edit of some kind. I don't know. But either way, apparently this was said. Not sure y'all want to get in the weeds at anywhere near this level, but I have very interesting information. Not sure what it would sound like, but I have things I can show. I also have a connection to one of your previous guests. Of course, it's a small world. I was entered into a clandestine program as a child. This is a very strange conversation, and it's hard to believe, especially like I said earlier. It just strikes me as this sort of schizophrenic thread, but you can't just dismiss it entirely at face value, because it does provide a very strange, alternative perspective. But so yeah, he links to this this YouTube documentary, I believe is what it is, and then says that this is the last time shit had any real coverage publicly. I don't think it sounds like a joke in any way, shape, or form. Understood. Wasn't taking a shot at you, to be clear. Most people check it out. Seems ridiculous. No stress. I think it happened to me. Fuck. That's what you meant? I think it's still happening to me. I sold my gun because I was convinced last summer that I was about to be Epsteined, and you didn't know what to make of it? I was almost killed and briefed by associates for my involvement when I was early 20s. It almost drove me crazy. I cooled off in prison for a few years. I was instantly suicidal after the memories came back. Too much all at once. My brain felt like it was stitched back together. I have not spoken to anyone, including Sean, about this. I'm happy to help you work through it. It's what I've devoted my life to, and I help many survivors. I couldn't save some, and I try to forgive myself for things. Knowing what you're dealing with is the first step, no matter how horrible you feel. Temporarily override with logic at time, etc. There are strategies, and you can finish processing it. It was literally the word green. That's what was screaming in my brain. I heard it clearly. Went and got my pistol and disassembled it and locked it away from myself. I was so afraid that I would do it in my sleep. That is so crazy to me. There typically is layered triggers before that, which you may not be aware of, although perhaps those were softened after Ibogaine, etc. So the Ibogaine treatment, instantly I'm thinking that's what anyone who's suffering from heroin addiction, I believe, or if I remember, I think it is Ibogaine that they claim can basically restructure the pathways of your neurons, of the neurological framework in your brain, to where they can efficiently basically rewire your brain to no longer have these addictive qualities, which is extraordinary. But that is how people have stopped smoking cigarettes, using heroin. I mean, legitimately, that is what they claim, is that you can go down to Mexico or wherever they have these ibogaine clinics, and yeah, you go through these. There, I forget how many treatments they have, but you could keep coming back until the treatment is apparently, I can't remember again how many of the ibogaine treatments that you are supposed to go through, but it's many different ones. And so anyway, not at all surprised there that it would sort of be potentially utilized in this Manchurian MK Ultra mind control process as well, because it affects your neurological pathways. So who knows what else that could be utilized for, right? So it says, listen, I believe you, and sorry if I set this off in an undesirable way, but it is vital that we ensure your stability, etc. I just did it myself, got a dry erase board, started logging what was happening, and just drove west in a stolen 26 U-Haul. Interesting. 20. That's strange. My phone was being fucked with. My laptop cloned clumsily. It's hard to tell how intact your system is, but this right now, our discussion, may cause you some fallout, distress internally. All right. Well, that's worth discussing for a moment, because it's a very strange thread to this entire story. But here's where it says, Sean's former friend and SRS researcher became self-aware as a subject in Monarch after I contacted them in early 2023. They were cut off from Sean immediately. And that's when they went to the Monroe Institute. And so he says, he got me a scholarship for a week at the Monroe Institute, and he was going as well, but not at the same time. I refused to go, and it pissed him off. Them being the sponsors, not Monroe. I did refuse the scholarship. Sean was going, begged me to go. I just relented. So this person is supposedly a friend of Sean Ryan's, and they were both allegedly attending the Monroe Institute. And so I smelled the Monroe Institute trap a million miles away. I appreciate your fervor. I want to make clear, I thought Sean was my friend, and Katie was my friend before him. I don't care. I legitimately do not give a fuck. What happens to him, other supposed victims, whatever. Everyone has had equal access to the information as I have, ever since they put smartphones in our pockets. I figured out what works for me. That's all. That's all I can do. Good luck with your organization. Good luck with all of it. Sean can suck a dick, and I just hope everyone gets precisely what they deserve at this stage of the game, myself included. So, it's a very strange connection here. And then it says, for those accusing this of being an activated response regarding the recent events, false search my profile with his name. I came online giving him the benefit of the doubt and tried to positively network. I tried to handle this cleanly behind the scenes and escalated only in good faith. I'm trying to be responsible in these actions. This is dangerous stuff. His show is full of MK Ultra Monarch Mockingbird assets. The Manchurian candidate type programming is used in many ways. This needs to be discussed publicly, long form, for the good of the people. Unredacted proof. Sean Ryan is in a mind control scandal, dude. I got way more. I barely see messages on here. I'll try to get caught up with what you've sent me. Sean is a great friend of mine. Next time we speak, I'll discuss. Hope you're doing well. It's dead serious, man. Hope you're well too. Mind control and Sean Ryan. Organized safety. You may need to download instead of preview, or the writing will not be clear. Stephen Greer. Got it. Thanks. All right. Dr. Greer. Okay, so it looks like he's reaching out to Stephen Greer, and he says, I'm not new to this and aware. I know you're not new to this. Yeah, it possibly is. And that's why, as far as like you're saying, I bet even this is fake. I would not at all be surprised, especially I had mentioned who the source of this is clearly some sort of spook himself, right? So yeah, it's entirely impossible to assess the credibility ourselves here. But again, it's like the point being, we should at least acknowledge, right, the various threads that exist within these narratives, and see what we can make of it, because that's the best we can really end up doing, right? And so anyway, I just think, and I'll pivot after this, and we'll get into something different, because we can honestly probably talk about this for a little longer, but we've done enough. So yeah, he says, I know you're not new to this, but naturally someone on my end has to question handing witnesses to Sean. The exposure is there. Seems Sean going to gain everyone's trust, and there's a level of danger to that. A lot I can't say over text, but I just hope you are as ready as you think. All due respect. Yes, but nobody is being handed over to anyone. I'm in charge of the process. Sean was a following we must reach strategically. There are dozens of layers to this I'm working. USG, JSOC, corporate, ET, white hats, black hats, dozens of USAPS, 760 whistleblowers, etc. As for your risk assessment, nothing is risk-free. I'm well familiar with the layers as I was raised in it. Just don't be headstrong. You obviously didn't know what Sean... Let's see. And then it cuts off. So let's see. It looks like it's just further proof that this individual who's making these allegations was in contact with Sean Ryan to a certain extent, and that Sean Ryan allegedly even followed him on Twitter. So yeah, I think that there's more to this thread. Go check it out for yourselves if you find it interesting and worth worth your time. But yeah, just the fact that there is a potential mind control aspect to this entire thing is why would we be shocked, right? This is par for the course at this point as an operational standpoint, right? And so let's see. Have you looked at John Colin's dual pandemic theory? No, I don't think I have. I'll have to check into that ASAP, honestly. And I had mentioned how it was strange that what's his name, Tamerlan Tsarnaev had mentioned the fact that he could have been being programmed with subliminals, sort of, right, and couldn't account for this loss in time, and was waking up, in these strange places, not knowing how he got there. Well, he also, and again, remind yourselves that the radicalization process for Shamsuddin Jabbar in New Orleans is still not entirely been exposed, right? It's not been exposed to the public enough, and so it's an unfortunate thing. But he legitimately said that he was having dreams that his wife, apparently, he was having dreams that his wife should convert to the Islamic State, right? And so again, this sort of very much kind of raised that suspicion in my mind, right? And so anyway, how ISIS inspired the Army veteran who carried out the New Orleans terror attack. And so we're going to, at some point, I hope that more information comes out about this. And let's see. I guess we're having trouble streaming to X for some reason. But hopefully it's not really anything that I have to concern myself with. But anyway, beyond that, I thought it was just, at the very least, it was kind of a hilarious tangent, or just not tangent, but aside, is the fact that this Shamsuddin Jabbar was having these strange dreams involved with ISIS, right? And so let's see. The Shamsuddin Jabbar worked for Deloitte, which we talked about. Deloitte has been hiring former CIA agents since 2007, has received millions of dollars from Harris County for their services. So yeah, that's this is the last thing I want to talk about with Sean Ryan. and Sam Shoemate, because it clearly this guy claims to have exposed Sam Shoemate, and it's I think at least one of the last things we should talk about before mentioning, how we should be positively posting online, because clearly it's Elon's algorithmic tweak was really looks a lot more like content moderation, right? And overt censorship. But I guess we're supposed to be satisfied and content with our our new false prophets, right? But it's okay. It's all right. I mean, not at all. It's within the vein of the totalitarian technocracy. So it's just, as we talked about on Saturday, well, another step in the gradual tiptoe, right? So not at all shocked. Here we go.
Shoemate are lying to you. Sean Ryan and this guy Sam Shoemate are lying to you. This guy Sam Shoemate runs this conspiracy theory account called Terminal CWO. I actually caught him last year spreading fake emails that claimed U.S. pilots weren't getting enough flight hours because all the money was being sent to Ukraine. He's your typical garden variety conspiracy theorist. He was kicked out of the army because he didn't want to take the COVID vaccine. And I can kind of understand that. But dude, don't go around spreading conspiracy theories because you have an axe to grind. So now this guy has a new fake email. And Sean Ryan led him on his show to talk about how the Cybertruck bomber is actually still alive, and he knows gravitic propulsion systems are actually being used by China in drones on the East Coast. This guy is wackadoodle, and Sean Ryan let him just talk. So regarding Sam Shoemate, I basically have a bunch of JSON data on the guy. And I told him if he lied again, what would happen, but I guess he chose not to listen. So now we're going to do it the hard way, which is actually kind of the way I prefer. So keep in mind, when you listen to this guy, he already has a history of just making up emails out of thin air. He did it with this story, which he posted on Instagram last year. And Sean Ryan, shame on you. Shame on you for not vetting these sources.
All right, so clearly that guy's kind of a douchebag, but at the very least,
Sean Ryan and this guy Sam Shoemate.
It might be, worth our time to at least acknowledge the fact that he's making this claim of Sam Shoemate being such an utter fraud, which kind of falls within my perspective. But and here's the last thing I really want to talk about in regard to Sean Ryan is this ridiculous. Clearly, they're pushing this terrorist concept of domestic terrorism and coming through these sort of international channels, being ideologically influenced by ISIS, right? Which obviously we all know who created and manufactured the Islamic State, right? And I mean, at this point, if you aren't aware that we have UK production companies taking responsibility for legitimately not only financing but providing actors and props to the Islamic State, as far as they were creating and filming those public executions that were taking place, that were all the rage during the terror wars. That I'll never forget watching the beheading of. I watched a few different beheadings, of course, but I'll never forget watching one of the most viral at the time. Was it James Foley? I'm trying to remember now the name of the guy. I think it was James Foley. Yeah, pretty sure. American journalist kidnapped by ISIS in 2012 while covering the Syrian civil war and was beheaded by the group in August 2014. His murder was widely condemned and highlighted the dangers faced by journalists in conflict zones. Yeah, I'll never forget watching that beheading, but there's many different examples of just legitimately the UK production companies financed by intelligence agencies and organizations through public-private partnerships were not only financing and filming the public executions committed by ISIS at the time, that were, again, providing us all with the perfect example of what we had to fear and what liberties and freedoms we should give up, right, because of that threat. That was all manufactured by the state. It was manufactured by right? Just the intelligence community itself. And so, yeah, we need to remain skeptical at all times and remind ourselves, as Whitney Webb says right here in this very tweet, please remember the history of the last 25 years and recognize this for what it is. Repackaged neocon slop brought to you by former spooks, to get you to surrender your remaining freedoms in the name of fighting the war on domestic terror with consent, manufactured via an American Gladio-style op using the same fucking CIA boogeymen as 2001 to 2003, you know? And that is just such an accurate statement and perfectly represents my perspective and mentality behind Sean Ryan, right? Like my perspective on Sean Ryan and his credibility, and Sam Shoemate for that matter. And so again, we have to stop falling for these false narratives generated by spooks. You know, we have to just remain objective for our own sake at this point. So let's see. Former Navy SEAL Sean Ryan warns Joe Rogan that the Taliban is funneling terrorists into the U.S. through the southern border with plans for October 7th style attacks, which, by the way, there are so many claims now that they were bussing in bodies, right, at October 7th, and how much of it was staged is like, we know that it was a manufactured event, but God, like at this point, of course, it's, again, as always, it's impossible to kind of answer the unanswerable question for ourselves. But, you know, October 7th, my God, man, talk about, you know, generating a pretext, right? So anyway, apparently they have the passport office over there just making passports, he says. Now, that actually falls perfectly in line with what the CIA was doing at the Jeddah consulate during 9/11, which that might be the last thing we talk about before we end the show today. But so let's check out what propaganda our boy Sean Ryan is spinning on the Joe Rogan podcast. And we should, man, all these different spooks and CIA operatives that get a direct line onto the Joe Rogan experience, man, it makes me so, I'm just very concerned about such a prominent platform. You know, I'm not trying to talk shit on Joe Rogan, but it's just like when you realize, man, how powerful and how just prominent of a voice this platform truly gives the individuals who are gifted the opportunity, then maybe you would think twice about platforming various CIA operatives and you know, these ridiculous spooks that are in no way, you know, considering the best intentions of the underclass, which is what I like to just call, you know, what we were just discussing earlier, which was this feudalist system where we fall in place as, you know, this basically this sort of serfdom. You know, we fall into this sort of unfortunate class war that most people don't even acknowledge, right? So let's see what propaganda he was spinning for Joe Rogan.
They're doing is they're funneling is what I started digging deep, and I teamed up with the former CIA targeter Sarah Adams, and then a really good friend of mine, Scott Mann. We went over to Vienna to interview this guy, Ahmad Massoud, who's the leader, the commander of the Northern Alliance out there. That's like the resistance. It's kind of fighting the Taliban. You know, the Taliban pretty much took over government in Afghanistan, and
I saw the parade.
Yeah,
with our stuff,
with all our shit that we left there.
Crazy.
Yeah, man. So got a bunch of intel from Massoud, and you know, like, so kind of looping all the way back around to the southern border. I mean, so once Taliban took control of all of our shit, I mean, this could go on for a while, but so now what they're doing is they have the passport office over there just making legitimate passports to there's 21 terrorist organizations over there training. Hamza bin Laden, who we were told was killed, is actually fucking alive, and he's marrying into all these other terrorist networks. So he married Mullah Omar's daughter. He married who else? He married into all these different terrorist networks. And so these guys used to be like competitors, kind of, just like the UFO guys. They all hate each other, but they all have the one common theme, like disclosure. These guys, the one common thing is, let's go take over the Western world. So he is basically Hamza bin Laden is married into all these terrorist organizations. Now they all have one common goal: to come over to, the Western world and ruin our way of life. And so what they're doing is they're funneling as many of these terrorists into the passport office, creating them legitimate, real passports, and then they sprinkle them. They get them flights into all over South Central America, and then they funnel them up through the Darien Gap into the U.S. And so, there is zero. I don't give a fuck what the FBI or any of these people are saying. They have there is zero way to track how many of these fuckers have come in to the U.S. And so, now what we're going to see is like October 7th style attacks, like we just saw in Israel and in the mall in Russia, and everybody's like, oh, this
Do you think this is
terrorism
by design?
By design,
like leaving the border porous, allowing these people to come in.
Absolutely, I think it's by design.
Hell yeah!
They basically told Border Patrol, stand down. Like, do not do your fucking job. We're going to blast you. I mean, remember the guy on the horse that they said was whipping people, and it wound up being like the reins of the horse. I mean, I think it's by design, from the government, but I think that I think that the government is more incompetent than it's ever been before. And I think they have one common goal, and that I think the goal is voting. They want them to vote, but I don't think they're competent enough to realize the death and destruction and the other repercussions that we're going to face by keeping that border open, because they don't have anybody, that they don't have anybody with any experience that they don't have any solid intelligence stuff going on that's telling them like, hey, this is what's going to happen. It's all agenda driven.
Jesus Christ.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It does make sense that all they care about is voting, is get the people in. Don't worry about
I don't
the
know.
consequences.
Strange
But
conclusion.
The
to
more
come to.
insidious conspiracy would be that they want unrest because it gives them an opportunity to clamp down on rights.
I mean, shit, though. Unrest. I mean, they got really good at unrest. You know what I mean? The in 2020, right? All through
what the George
even
Soros
before
funded
20
Black Lives Matter,
up to that election. So I don't think they need to import terrorism.
Yeah, but it's a
and
different kind of
cartels.
unrest. The kind of unrest that you get from people blowing up Target is very different than the kind of unrest you get from a legitimate terror attack.
Yeah.
Interesting. That is very strange. Yeah, so I think that at this moment it is just, my God, it is becoming more and more clear that we cannot trust these spooks, right? Who are manufacturing these narratives. And by the way, William's so funny, man. This is perfect. Nothing suspicious here. Move along. First, a former Fort Bragg serviceman commits a terror assault down Bourbon Street. Next, a supposed suicide at the DA's office, right? And we had talked about how that assistant district attorney was found suicided at the DA's office in New Orleans. But yeah, I just by now, if you don't already know that this is all predicated on an illusion, as we spoke about to begin with, in the beginning of the show, then yeah, I feel as if it's just this sort of it really just becomes like a choose your own reality simulation, right? And it's kind of ridiculous because that's what I see coming out of the two-party delusion, right? The misconception, right, of the two-party paradigm, and this sort of culture war, right, within the framework of partisan ideological differences, right? But when you see that we are inevitably kind of following this similar path, no matter who is in power in DC, and we continue to witness this overt censorship policy on Twitter that is obviously generated by, we've talked about it before, but the World Economic Forum and freedom of speech, freedom of speech, not freedom of reach, right? And it's that is the algorithmic tweak that they're talking about. It's content moderation, and it's encourage positivity. Get the fuck out of here. Positive posting is what we need to concern ourselves with. Like that is in times of moral crisis, we need to be worried about criticizing Elon Musk, right? like that is absolutely ridiculous. And when you read through what some of these people were as far as just like the restrictions that they were given and the reasons why, as far as like they might be, their posts on X, right, might be flagged as negative under this various criteria. You go and you read some of the various criteria that they were flagging this content for, and it basically says that those discussing strategic work partnerships in a negative light, especially if they involve personal grievances or criticisms, posts that critique or challenge other users or public figures in a way that's perceived as harsh or personal rather than constructive, content mentioning negative experiences with the platform's features or algorithms, particularly if expressed with frustration or negativity. So it is such a joke, that anyone believes in the false prophet that is Elon Musk and the Peter Thiel network and the PayPal mafia that surround Trump's new rights and the administration that's transitioning into power. But it's a par for the course. It's the status quo. And so meanwhile, we get to watch Biden award George Soros with a Presidential Medal of Freedom award, and I think Hillary Clinton as well received some sort of award. Which, what kind of world are we living in? When right, like, my God, you think that they actually have some sort of goal in mind to improve public policy? Like, my God, they're awarding war criminals, they're awarding psychopaths with medals of freedom, and giving the Nobel Peace Prize to to psychopathic murderers. And I just don't understand how we can fall into that misconception any longer after all of this. And so pair that with billionaire Larry Ellison saying, vast AI fueled surveillance systems can ensure citizens will be on their best behavior. And yes, you should be, oh man, I mean, at that point, you got to understand that, BlackRock, Blackstone Capital, George Soros covertly financing Jared Kushner's cadre. It's that's where you think that, oh well, the left has their oligarchs and the right has their oligarchs, and there's still some sort of legitimacy in the context of the of the partisan divide, but it's all predicated on an illusion, right? And in reality, they're financing both sides of the political aisle, right? And that's where I discovered the terrifying prospect of of, you know, really who financed Donald Trump's rise to power, and kind of who helped bail him out, were special interest groups directly tied in with the Rockefeller, Rothschild, families, and you wonder why the during the Trump administration, we achieved more of the benchmarks toward Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 than in any previous administration prior. So again, yeah, I'm sorry. I know that it's never popular to criticize politicians, depending on where you land on the political spectrum, but I will, at the very least, I will remain objective, and I'm very critical of all of the political class. So, hopefully you don't take that personally, because these political puppets, they despise you and your family anyway. So to be under this misconception that it's your role to defend them, um, yeah, like, get out from under that trap, because that's the only possible way you can, you know, hopefully, um, improve your perspective and intellect going forward, and maybe kind of insulate yourself from from the propaganda as much as we possibly can. And I said that we would get to the Delphi update, but that's clearly not going to happen. So I don't know. I did a lot of rambling about certain things, but I hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and you got something out of some of the threads that we were kind of going down. One last thing I thought was kind of hilarious was that Biden happened to be at Camp David with Netanyahu when he addressed the public in regard to the terrorist attacks that occurred, and I just kind of thought that was very fitting in regard to the political landscape in this very moment. So let's see if I had anything else before we get out of here. We should probably at some point go over Deloitte and their espionage practices with accountants and spies, which there's a pretty awesome article we might go over tomorrow in regard to that. And then how the investigation in New Orleans is now crossing international borders, which shouldn't surprise us at all, considering the fact that, he apparently traveled to Egypt, Ontario, Canada. Shamsuddin Jabbar, he was traveling all over like he was Lee Harvey Oswald or something. It was very interesting, and I had off the heels of what Sean Ryan was just telling Rogan about the passports being manufactured for these criminals and organizations and terrorists. Well, it's funny because in 9/11, there's a very similar story where basically the story of the 19 Arab hijackers, which has been termed the myth of the 19 Arab Oswalds, which I always found such a perfect way to describe the 9/11 hijackers. But it led us to sort of tug on a more compelling thread when I did my 9/11 episode, where we discovered what was called the Visa Express program that was run out of the Jeddah consulate in Saudi Arabia and helped at least 11 of the 19 alleged 9/11 hijackers to obtain their visas in order to gain entry into the U.S. And so the State Department whistleblower J. Michael Springman, he worked as an official in the visa section of the U.S. consulate in Jeddah throughout the 1980s, yeah, where he alleged that CIA officials were in fact overriding the consular services officials who were attempting to plausibly deny suspect visa applications. Springman claims that while he was stationed in Saudi Arabia, he was ordered by high-level State Department officials to issue visas to unqualified applicants. He then testified that the American Consul General J. Ferreras bombarded him with demands, not requests, demands, along with the political officer and his successor, in order to circumvent standard operative operative procedure in order to issue visas to many of the alleged 19 hijackers. Springman states that these applicants were terrorist recruits of CIA asset Osama bin Laden, who were being sent to the U.S. in order to obtain further training from the CIA. So Springman issued complaints to higher authorities at several agencies, of course, to no avail. So in an interview with CBC, Springman explained when he refused the visas because of the U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act, and the State Department's own regulations clearly stated that a visa applicant is an intending immigrant unless and until he can prove otherwise. Springman was repeatedly overruled by the chief of the consular section, Justice Stevens, sometimes in the face of very real and very vocal threats against him. He says he issued the visas with a notation on the application form as to why he had refused it, and that he had reversed himself only upon direct order of the head of the consulate, J. Philip Ferreras. Now, things got so bad that on Ferreras' order, he wasn't allowed to issue any visas unless the CIA base chief had approved them. In one case, 2 Pakistanis apply for visas to attend a trade show in the U.S., but they are unable to name the trade show or city in which it will be held. When Springman denies them a visa, he gets an almost immediate call from a CIA case officer hidden in the commercial section of the consulate that he should reverse himself and grant these guys a visa. Springman then refused, but the decision was reversed by the chief of the consular section. Springman realized that even the ambassador, Walter Cutler, was aware of the situation, which became more brazen and blatant as time went on. And on one occasion, Springman is even told, if you want a job in the State Department in the future, you will change your mind. And his career path was entirely derailed. And Michael Springman was inevitably forced to become a whistleblower. So that is, you know, it's kind of ridiculous to imagine that this hasn't been commonplace for longer than we could ever even, I would imagine. It's just, there's been this clandestine covert infiltration for so long, right? And yeah, getting all 19 of the passports also had to be misdirection. Yeah, they have their own planes. Why not just fly them where they needed them? Man, honestly, it's probably just out of convenience, just to get, right? Like, as far as just travel in itself, like, I'm sure you wouldn't want to bring them on military flights, but who knows? I mean, it's possible they brought Oswald back from Russia on a military plane, so it would make sense. But again, we have the evidence here of essentially a smoking gun, providing the facts of how the vast majority of the alleged hijackers were not only receiving direct training from the CIA, but were given visas to enter the United States by the CIA, right? And so here we go with another example of an official, clearly not in the most powerful position, but having good intentions, and luckily, remaining, ethical as far as I'm concerned, to an extent to where he was willing to, publicly expose these unfortunate realities in regard to the visas and the 9/11 hijackers, and so we're gifted, this thread of evidence proving that intelligence sponsored the hijackers, not only in their training, but in the process of traveling to the U.S. domestically to perform their operation, their covert operations. And we already know that they, a vast majority of the hijackers were going and were being gifted all these drugs from intelligence assets and operatives. They would just go down to a local airport, apparently, where they had a contact, and I forget which hijackers it was, but yeah, they were partying with like these. I think they were prostitutes or strippers, one of the two. And those strippers or prostitutes later then made official claims on the record that yeah, they could get vast amounts of cocaine and even money as well. It was at their beck and call. They could just show up at this local airport where they had their local CIA contact, and they would just give them a bunch of cocaine so they could go party. And so yeah, that it's at this point, knowing, and we had talked about this on Saturday, knowing that there has been this sort of operational tactical standpoint domestically in the US of these black site training camps, right, that have been set up and staged all over the United States. And like I had said on Saturday, even Howard Hughes was brought in by Nixon to help kind of finance this enterprise, and that JFK and RFK were totally unaware of it until they were sworn into office, and then discovered, unbeknownst to them, that this was happening, that they were radicalizing and training up Cuban exiles to use them in covert operations to cause chaos. It was very much like Operation Chaos as well, right? So, and if you understand the Phoenix Project and how Colston Westbrook, right, CIA Phoenix Project asset, was brought over and ran the Patty Hearst operation with Cinque de Freeze at the prison, where the institution where Charles Manson had gone to, and they were running MK Ultra operations and psychologically controlling these prisoners, with testing them with all these various drugs, and then letting them escape. That's what they would do. They had prison guards on their payroll, and they would just allow for certain prisoners to escape, so they could then use plausible deniability to claim, oh my God, this escaped prisoner fled the area, went all across the country to Texas from California, and staged this fascinating attack, right, which happened multiple times in regard to the Operation Chaos narrative. And it's a crazy story looking into all of this, but again, status quo, par for the course, and typical operational, as far as typical, strategic operations, right? As far as I'm concerned, domestically, this is nothing new. So I probably should wrap it up, because I am already at an hour, and I'm almost at 2 hours. So I should probably jet, guys. But this was fun. I enjoyed myself again. Like, there's so much that I planned on talking to you guys about, but I'll probably end up here tomorrow as well. I think Jose said that he wouldn't be able to do the live stream tomorrow either. So yeah, I might end up here in the morning. So meet me back here, guys. And like I said, I'll try and hell yeah, buddy. I appreciate you for subbing. And on that note, anyone, please, if you don't mind, I'm trying to grow the YouTube consistently, and so go ahead and subscribe, share, like, comment, like I said before, and give me some feedback too if you enjoy these streams, and yeah, hit me up, DM me, send me some stuff if you want me to discuss it, talk about it, and hopefully we'll have some constructive conversations and get to the bottom of some of these false narratives. But anyway, guys, I really appreciate you as always. You guys can support me at Buzzsprout and Patreon. They're the two best places. I know I'll get the Rumble going. That way, we can have that additional kind of avenue as well, open and available. And also, especially because I don't want anything to happen to the YouTube and render me voiceless. So, hey, man, I appreciate you, buddy. Thank you for saying that. And got nothing but love for you guys, as always. And if you enjoy the show, any of it has ever resonated with you, please, like I said before, reach out, just let me know. And I appreciate that almost as much as, not quite as much as becoming a patron, but you know what I mean. It means the world to me. And so stay vigilant, you guys. Psychologically, this is PSYOP season for real, right? Like this is going to be a very interesting upcoming year, I feel. But hey, we got each other, man. That's something, like I said, Saturday, we can sort of take solace in. And thanks again, you guys. Like I said, I'll probably be here tomorrow morning. So sub, follow the Underclass podcast. I appreciate you guys. Have a good day, man.